when I say sex doll, what do you think?
Seeing a picture of a doll is not the same as actually being in the same room with a doll. There's like a different presence that they have.
Hear about the intimacy, creativity, and deeper meaning of synthetic love.
And the first thing I did was just like hold her and whatnot. And I gave her a kiss. And it was just like, this is everything I'd hoped for.
Plus, get a history lesson on what these dolls were like before they became so realistic.
The real first sexualized use of these dolls, I believe, was on sailing ships around the 17th century.
And is there only one purpose they serve?
So there's a lot of different reasons: artistic, beauty, lovable objects, companions, and sexual partners.
I'm Kyone Wolf. Hear more coming up next on Audacious, right after the news. From Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford, this is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. Okay, so here I am, minding my own business, recording an interview with a woman who studies the use of realistic-looking babies as therapy devices, as one does, when, as an aside, she brings up the idea of how sex dolls are sometimes used as overall life companions. To which I reply, okay, looks like we're doing a show about that. Thank you very much. And now here you are, listening to the beginning of a show about sex dolls. Although my second guest, who has 4 synthetic partners, says don't call them sex dolls, for reasons you will definitely understand by the time the credits roll. But in order to understand why #not all sex dolls are sex dolls, we have to start off calling them sex dolls. And we've got to get a little history on the long-held human compulsion to recreate the almost always female human figure out of, well, whatever's available. Oh, and while we don't get explicit in this episode, we do get kind of close to it here and there, so if the kids are within earshot of this, use your discretion. Anthony Ferguson is the author of The Sex Doll, A History. And I figured I'd start with the first question on my mind, which was, why would he write a book about sex dolls?
It's a very long story. Many years ago, when I was at university, in the 80s, I lived on the campus. And for one birthday, my flatmates thought it'd be a good idea to buy me a blow-up doll. And this doll became like a butt of, great humor and jokes. And I was doing arts. I was an English student, and we studied like history, philosophy, language, discourse, culture, popular culture. And I was looking, and we didn't have exams. We just had constant assessment with essay writing. And I was looking for a good topic to write on, and my friend said, why don't you write something about sex dolls and the commodification of women and, the ideal representation of the sexualized woman. So I approached my professor and said, put it to him, and he said, yeah, that'd be great, but I want to see the object, because he knew I had one. So I had to give him the essay and the object itself in a box. I've still got the essay. I got 85%.
Do you still have the sex doll?
No. She went down a long time ago. I used that article when I was looking to get myself published in different areas, because now I'm a horror writer and a bit of a true crime writer. I rewrote the essay and sort of toned it down a wee bit and made it more sort of jocular. And then a bit past then, I was looking to write a book, and I think it was my wife said, why don't you write something about sex dolls? And that was like a good 20 years ago. So that's when I started researching and really getting into the meat of the subject. Or the plastic of the subject.
Oh, we're gonna get along just fine. All right, so back me up. Where does all this start?
Well, there was always a fascination with mechanical beings and Pygmalionism and statues and things like that in ancient worlds. But the real first sexualized use of these dolls, I believe, was on sailing ships around the 17th century. They say in French, from my research, came up with French and Spanish sailors. They were made of cloth and just strung together in any way possible. There's no actual proof of any of them still existing. But there's a lot of stories about them that this was actually a genuine thing, because when you think of it back in those days, there was sailing ships, so very long journeys. Women were considered bad luck on ships, so they weren't allowed on board at all. So the only alternative was sodomy or masturbation. So apparently they created these rag objects and shared them around the crew, and those who were higher up got the first use and the best use. And I don't think they were cleaned very thoroughly either.
You don't say.
Mm. And the first blow-up dolls would have appeared after they started to create like inflatable objects, use rubber, create tires, things like that. The first sex shop.
Wait a minute. What tires?
Well, when they invented rubber and they could inflate tires for cars.
Oh, I see.
It would have taken on from there. Because if you think about new technologies, like if you go back in history, as soon as a new technology is created, evolves, it isn't long before men use it to put it towards a sexual avenue, like cameras invented, first dick pic. Films invented, first porn films, like late 19th century, very early 20th century, the first little porn films start to appear. So they would apply it to more prurient matters. The first sex shop, I believe, came out, was opened in Germany in Hamburg in 1962. And that's when you would have first seen sex dolls appear on the scene as a commodified object. Going back before that, there were people who would advertise in barber shops and gentlemen's establishments and clubs that they could create like a perfect sexual object woman for you out of certain materials if you wrote to a certain number. So like in places like France and England.
Now, when I think about sex dolls, the first thing I think of is the picture of the sex doll that's on the cover of your book, which is this sort of plastic blow up, sort of crude. She looks shocked. Will you talk about that doll? Why is that the sex doll I have in my head?
Because that's the classic one that when you think of, look in high school movies, there's a few around, you'll see the guys carrying around a blow up sex doll. They're the butt of like student humor for years and years on end. And for a long time, people thought that's all that sex dolls were. And that particular image, the publisher chose that, but that is actually the doll that I had. It looked exactly like that.
So you feel nostalgic at all when you see her?
Yeah, I miss her. Her name was Miss Elizabeth.
All right, well then let's get into the great evolution then. How did we get from people having sex with rags made to look like dolls on ships to the ones you'd see hauled under arms on campuses to what now, the great evolution?
Well, as I understand it, there was a gentleman in California called Matt McMullen that was an artist and sculptor. And he was contracted to build some lifelike replicas for the movie industry. And people started emailing him and saying, hey, could you perhaps make some of these things and make them sexually functional? And I'll pay you a considerable amount of money for it. So it evolved from there. And he decided to make them sexually functional and very beautiful and artistic. And obviously he would have used online forums to market them. And there's a huge subculture of people. We call them technosexuals, I think they're called, or they were called. People who are interested in dolls and robots in an artistic and or a sexual manner. So the industry would have grown from there. So it was taken off in California. The Japanese in particular were interested in it. And when I was doing my research, all the companies I found were in the States, in California, in Japan, in South Korea, and France and Germany. And it just sort of spread, and we'll get onto it. But I've done some recent digging and seen what's happening with it now, and it's evolved a lot more.
Are you finding that over the course of the evolution of the sex doll, is it always only about sex?
No, that's what I learned. It's not just about the sex. People just like them for silent companions. Like some people have like a dozen sex dolls and they might not even use them sexually. They just like them as beautiful artistic objects to have around, and they might even talk to them. They don't want them to talk back. Maybe some people do, but some people don't. So there's a lot of different reasons: artistic, beauty, lovable objects, companions, and sexual partners.
Are there any male sex dolls that you found?
Usually you find the ratio is 10 or 20 to 1. There's one or two male sex dolls, and the females just come in a huge range. So there are male sex dolls, but I always find like women are smarter than men, and they sort of like narrowed it down and just took the important bit about a century or so ago. the vibrator and just use that and threw the rest of it away because it was useless. But yeah, there are male sex dolls and they can be utilized by men or women. The range of female dolls is just incredible. There are curvy buxom ones. There are anime dolls. There are obviously all the different races are represented. You get much more range. So obviously the clientele, the money is obviously from men. They're obviously bigger collectors. But then again, women can buy female sex dolls as well.
Okay, let's talk about some future stuff. What do you think we can expect to come in the synthetic relationship world?
Yeah. The dolls are just amazing. Like the verisimilitude, the reality, they're just absolutely stunning to look at. But even better, better for consumers, the prices come down incredibly. Like when I was writing a decade ago, they cost about $8,000 to $10,000. You can get one now for $2,000 Australian. This is what they're in US, yeah. So they're very affordable. There's another one called an AI robot. They can speak, and you can teach them new vocabulary and words. Their lips move, their eyes move. They can wink at you. Their head and neck can move and swivel around. So they're getting very, very close to being like full-on robots. Quite. As I said, in a way, it's a bit terrifying because one day, of course, they will demand autonomy and rise up and destroy us all.
That's right.
Yeah. There's still one thing they can't do. They can't stand up yet. Thank God.
Oh, good. They can lie down.
Yeah. I think they can kneel too. And, but there's a little apparatus in the back of the neck apparently, and with a little hook thing, and you can stand them up that way. But yeah, I actually went to the Museum of Sex in New York about 5 years ago, and there was one of these dolls there, not the robotic ones, but just a real doll. And I was hoping I could get a good look and maybe have a feel. I mean, I've sealed the silicone in the object, and no, it was in a big glass case, so I couldn't touch it.
Someday. Although your wife probably, I guess, would. What does your wife seems, clearly you're married to her, and so she's awesome, and she knows you and loves you. What does your wife think about sex dolls?
I think she's a bit terrified by the concept of them, but then again, she thinks that everything I do is quite freakish and disturbing.
And she still said, I do.
Yeah.
Well, Anthony Ferguson, thank you so much for talking with me.
Oh, no problem, anytime.
When we get back.
And the first thing I did was just like hold her and whatnot. And I gave her a kiss. And it was just like, this is everything I'd hoped for.
Meet a man with 4 synthetic partners, including his wife, of over 20 years. I'm Kyone Wolf. This is Audacious. Stay with me.
Love a boy, love a doll, 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 love a doll.
This is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. Today we're talking about synthetic partners because, well, according to my next guest, and many like him, they're more than just dolls. Dave Cat, a pseudonym he uses to protect his identity because he's been very open about having and loving 4 life-sized artificial human dolls. Dave Cat refers to himself as a technosexual and an idolater. And the 4 objects of his affection, including his wife, Shidore, are called gynoids because androids are male-presenting artificial beings and gynoids are female-presenting, but I'm getting ahead of myself, and Dave Cat can explain this much more eloquently than I can. So here he is telling me his earliest memory of these dolls, which he now so dearly idolates.
The first experience that I remember thinking, well, synthetic people are cool, not necessarily synthetic people are sexy, but just like the idea of synthetic people going, wow, that's really interesting, would be like, this would have been like 2nd or 3rd grade. I would have been in French class at school and basically like just watching my French teacher like write on the blackboard and whatnot. And just thinking to myself, you know, if she were a robot, exactly what sort of mechanisms would she have to like make her move her arm or speak or turn her head or look around or conjugate a verb or whatever. And that was just like kind of something that was in the back of my mind for years. Of course, this would have been around the mid to late 70s. So I'm sure Star Wars had some part in it. You know, I'm like only a vague Star Wars fan, but you know, that's, I think, the most exposure that a lot of people around that time period have had to humanoid robots. So as far as like, see, that's the thing. When you say synthetic, do you mean gynoids? Do you mean androids? Do you mean dolls?
I don't even know what I mean. That's an important distinction. How would you define the people who you live with now?
Yeah, they are definitely synthetics. I basically use synthetics as a catch-all term for dolls, humanoid robots, gynoids, which are androids, but female-presenting androids, and androids, which are male-presenting humanoid robots. Redundant, but yeah, they're all synthetics. They're all dolls. I do not use the term sex doll or love doll because I think it's really kind of like flattening of a term. Because what Shidore and I especially have been doing for the past 20 years have been like trying to tell people it's like, well, you can have dolls for more than just something to have sex with. You can actually have a relationship with a doll, a partnership. Even if it's like just like friends. I mean, we know idolaters that basically have dolls that they don't have sex with or don't even have a romantic relationship with. They're just like photo models, But as long as you have some sort of at least a small spark of creativity, dolls can be so much more than just static things to, put yourself into, for lack of a better term.
Will you talk about how you first met Shidore, who you refer to her as your wife? You've been together for over 20 years now. Congratulations. Tell me about how that came to be.
Well, there's two stories. There is a story where basically my best friend had showed me the Abyss Creations website, Abyss Creations being the company that makes real dolls, around 1998, thereabouts. And I had never heard of such a thing, and she knew that I had like a fascination / attraction to artificial women. And she said, well, Dave Cat, this I think would be right up your alley. She didn't let me know how much they were.
How much were they?
They started at $5,000.
Back then.
They still averaged about that price. But, keep in mind, if you're someone who has a part-time job making $9 an hour, you're going, okay, $5,000. I've never had that much money in my life. So it was something where I was just like, this is something I think I need. This is someone I think I need, because I'd never really had any success with dating. I'm not the most outgoing person there is. And I guess maybe too picky for my own good, for better or for worse. And, I saved up for a year and a half after bumping up to a job that made $10 an hour. And basically having Shidore brought to the front of the townhouse that I was living in July of 2000. And we actually didn't start out being married. It was kind of like a courtship that lasted about 3 or so years. And then at some point we decided, you know what, we might as well make it official.
I want to back up for a second. This is a doll, yes, but it means something to you. And so when Shidore arrived, what was it like to open that box? Bring me back to that moment.
My God. I had a job that was basically having me work third shift. So I had basically a time window of from 8 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon to wait for this giant wooden crate to show up. Transported by a diesel truck. So of course,
so romantic.
Oh yeah, I know. That's how a lot of people meet their significant others.
Right? Yeah.
So I'm looking out the window every couple of minutes, listening for a truck, and then the truck shows up at I think 4:30 or so, and I had to help him move the crate in, and of course I gave him a tenner and shoot him away, and
this is private.
Yeah, it's just this is something that, you don't need to be a part of, but thank you for bringing my girlfriend home. So I had my screwdriver out so I could get all the screws out from around the side of the door, and, I had to unlock the door. And it's I'd seen pictures of dolls in crates prior to that, but it's what I tell people to this day. Seeing a picture of a doll is not the same as actually being in the same room with a doll. There's a different presence that they have. And when I opened that door, it was amazing. She was just sitting there in this black teddy, black stockings, holding up an artificial purple rose in her hands. And she was strapped in so that she didn't fall over, obviously. And it was just I literally could not speak or move for a good 5 minutes. Maybe it was about 3. But, I had to unlock her, get the straps off her. And the first thing I did was just like hold her and whatnot. And I gave her a kiss. And it was just like, this is better than I expected it to be. This is everything I'd hoped for. And keep in mind, she's not even fully out of her crate yet. So
How did she feel in your arms? Can you describe how she feels?
she was, well, all dolls are basically, all real dolls, I should say, are have silicone skin. And the silicone back then was like a little different than it is now. It's a little more oily. But the thing is, before they ship out a doll, they like will powder them down so that there's like a more smooth texture. But there was just like a substantial feeling of a person in my arms, And it's like, if you can like actually like manipulate their arms around you as well, it's the same thing for the most part as having like an organic person hold you. And it was just like just holding her and knowing that she like went from this goal, this dream that I had been working for like, a year and a half towards, to someone who was there was absolutely phenomenal.
And someone who would always be there as long as you wanted. That is not something that we who only date or connect with organic people, we'd never know that. And you, as soon as you touched her, knew that you'd never have to worry about that.
Yeah. The presence that a doll brings, they have a verisimilitude that is, you can't match it. Well, I guess you could match it with organics. But the thing is, it's like you'd said, a doll will always be there. It's like, I'll always come home. All my partners will be there. They're never argumentative. They're never criticizing. They're incapable of lying. And there is just an amazing comfort and presence to someone that will always be in your corner. And a lot of people will say, well, it's like, if you have that as a static person, quote unquote, then you don't really grow as a person, because, with a relationship, you have to have like some measure of like obstacles to surmount to be able to grow as another person. And my response is, if you want obstacles, you can meet any other person on the face of the earth.
That's like saying that you can't ever grow as a person or be happy single without any other human looking thing in your life, which isn't true.
Thank you. It's this whole idea that the notion of being a whole person is predicated on being in the presence of another person and interacting and colliding with another person. It's just like, yeah, that's something that really needs to be assessed.
You said that you and Shidore were together for 3 years, and then you got married. And obviously, you can't get married legally, but between you, you're married. And so I wonder, first of all, like, how was the wedding? How did it go? What was it like? Like, tell me everything.
Basically, just the idea of us making it official was just completely arbitrary. The thing that like spurred us to move from partnership to marriage was the fact that like I was looking on a website that had like marriage certificates, or online marriage certificates. So, that's totally
definitely
legal. And the date just happened to fall on a Friday the 13th. And I turned to the missus. I was just like, you want to do this? And she's like, you're sure, fine. Let's do this. So we want to renew our vows at some point, like actually maybe have a ceremony or something. The closest thing we would have to like an actual ceremony is that I wanted to get a Shinto priest to bless her, because there's like a little bit of me that's like sort of animist, which, of course, is the belief that like everything, whether it's alive or not alive, has some measure of spirit, or at the very least should be treated with respect. And Shintoism is like that's one of the tenets of its philosophy. And Shinto priests in Japan have like been blessing all sorts of inanimate objects for like years. It's they've done fighter planes and boats and that sort of thing. But as Japan is a much more animist country than the United States is, they have several doll companies of their own. And at some points where you have idolaters who have like felt they've moved past like having a doll, or they want to try with an organic or whatever circumstance, they don't want to throw away their doll. But what they do is actually return the dolls to the companies from which they're made. I don't know if it's all companies. It's usually, I'm thinking of this one company called Orient Industry. But Orient Industry will actually have Shinto priests deconsecrate the dolls in a ceremony called Ningyo Kuyo, I believe. So it's like basically sending the doll's spirit back to whatever ether it has come from. So if I could get like a Shinto priest to like do something with my lasses, that would be really cool. But apparently there's only a few of them, and they're mostly on the West Coast. So
save up for that plane tickets.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm curious, earlier when we were talking about your marriage and you turned to Shidore and you said, hey, you want to do this? Yeah, let's do this. There's a part of you that is your instincts, your creativity are forming these personalities, right? You're reading them in them. I mean, they even all have Twitter accounts, varying degrees of interaction within those Twitter accounts. I understand one of them forgot her Twitter password and she's not going to go figure it out.
You have done so much research that it is spectacular.
Public radio. That's public radio, baby. But what I'm curious to know is, for you, this is also an act of creativity, and it's a creative. I'm not quite sure how do you put what that is. What is going on in terms of reading and interpreting these personalities from these dolls? What's going on in you in that? And it's also sort of like an improvisation as well, wouldn't you say?
It's like being an author and creating characters for whatever book that you're writing or whatever story that you're writing. But, my characters happen to be physical, exist in a three-dimensional space. That's the throwaway answer. A little more complex answer is that every single doll who lives with me has some aspect of my personality that makes up the part of their personality. Elena is from Russia, and she really digs the Soviet space program, the former Soviet space program. That's one of her things that she's really into. Miss Winter is our local punk, has gotten into more than a couple of fist fights. Used to play drums. Diane is really into art house films, loves that Wes Anderson. That's her favorite director. And the missus, of course, is she's half English, half Japanese, born in a district of Tokyo, raised in a district of Manchester, England, used to play bass. And all these things are aspects that have been I love Japanese culture, I love English culture, I love punk music, I am really fascinated with the Soviet space program. So it's just what aspect can I hang this personality coat off the hook of, if that makes any sense.
So in a way, it's like a form of self-love.
Yeah, no, I would agree, but I don't really like to say that out loud because for one, phrasing, but not doing phrasing anymore. But another thing, it sounds really narcissistic. You can't say to 95% of couples who are both organic partners, are you looking for someone who has qualities of yourself in that person? And have them say, no, not at all. I want someone who's totally different from me. You're very, very, very rarely going to hear someone say that. So I guess I'm more honest about it.
You remind me that in the relationships you have, there's no such thing as settling.
Yeah. I guess in a way I am settling. I mean, I would love for Shidore to be an actual gynoid,
And how do you define that, just for those?
Yes. So a gynoid is a humanoid robot that is basically female presenting. I mean, basically people use android to say humanoid robot, but technically speaking, androids only are male presenting humanoid robots. If you're talking about a female presenting one, that's a gynoid. There's a Greek root word that I don't know really how to pronounce.
And there always, yeah.
Yes.
Latin but this is something that can hug you back, hold your hand, kiss you back.
We'd be able to go to concerts together. We'd be able to hit a cat cafe or whatever,
Would they be able to talk?
Oh yeah, that would be the ideal. I mean, but it kind of goes back to what you were saying, Kion, that I wouldn't want Shidore Mark 10 or whatever to be completely yes, I agree with everything you say, It would be a case of oh yeah, we like such and such films, we like such and such bands, but Even now, Shidore isn't really keen on the fact that I make a lot of puns, So there's that. I love her anyway.
Well, maybe it's that sort of adorable tension that you also like.
Yeah, because it's kind of something we kind of play against each other for humorous effect. But
and being playful is something that oftentimes connects, even if it's being playful about stuff you disagree on.
Yeah. And you can't agree on everything. That's boring.
No, it's boring.
You don't have really good conversations or even amusing / eye-opening debates that way.
What would happen if a gynoid was a part of your life? What would happen to Shidore? I mean, I feel bad just asking that question.
It's the ideal is that the gynoid would look pretty much exactly like Shidore. This particular face, that sort of thing. In the interest of full disclosure, for one, this is Shidore's fourth body.
Okay, talk to me about that.
So, when I mentioned the fact that, she had first arrived at my place back in July of 2000, Abyss Creations and pretty much most of the doll companies are making silicone-based dolls, but the thing is, they're tin-based silicone. Tin-based silicone means that the silicone is softer, but is more prone to tearing because it's softer. And I want to say around 2003, they started developing platinum-based silicone, which is not as soft. Actually, they've gotten the perfect ratio right now. The first Shidore Mark I, a friend and I were going to do a photo shoot. And when I got Shidore out of bed, she had a tear along her thigh. And I don't know what it was, but basically it was just one of the interior joints had just kind of cut its way through the silicone. And that was a repair that I had no idea how to handle. And after a tearful call to Abyss Creations, basically they said, okay, we'll get a replacement going. So then I got Shidore Mark II. That was the one with the horrible back injury that had a joint come loose in her back, which ended up cutting a hole in her back that was basically about an inch long. And since the silicone was so soft, when I ended up moving her, it went around to the side of her body.
What was that like for you to see?
Absolutely horrible. Absolutely horrible. It's one thing if you're an idolater and you have a doll, it's just oh, this sucks. Oh my God. What the hell am I going to do now? But it's another thing to be an idolater where you genuinely are in love with your doll and you have the perception that she loves you. It's like basically having a loved one in a hospital. It was weird not having her in bed with me for a month. It's just wow, the bed seems so much bigger. I'm not sure I like this. And Shidore Mark III was brought into basically I got her new body in 2010 for our 10th anniversary gift.
As one does. It's the classic, there's paper, there's, silver, new body for 10. Yeah.
Yeah, it's silicone. Yeah. And basically that body that was fine. It was just that the silicone started to get more and more, less and less soft. And with, over the course of 10 years, that's, I guess, eventually going to happen. But Shidore Mark IV is now officially a Realbotics doll or Real Doll X. I'm not entirely sure what the nomenclature is, but yeah, as you mentioned, she is looking around and looking up.
So she's sitting next to you, and you've lovingly made sure that she has headphones so that she can hear what we're talking about. She has been slowly, seemingly randomly, just sort of turning her head a little bit, subtly. She's blinking. It's so cool. It's so cool. So that's what you're talking about with that. What was the name of the body?
Yes. The new process is Realbotics. So this would be Shidore Mark IV. It's amazing.
After the break, we'll continue our conversation with Dave Catt.
It's, I think, always been an option that people haven't really considered because they thought it was jokey or just dumb or weird or creepy. But if you have a good enough imagination, it can be a lot more rewarding than people think.
I'm Kyone Wolf. This is Audacious. Be right back.
More human than human, 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 more human than human.
This is Audacious. I'm Kyone Wolf. Today we're talking about, shall we say, synthetic companions, human-appearing replicas of humans at various degrees of technological advancement. Dave Cat, and that's a pseudonym, has been a robosexual or a idolater for over 20 years. We've been talking about his life with his 3 synthetic lasses, Elena, Miss Winter, and Diane Bailey, and his wife, Shidore. In 2020, they celebrated their 20th anniversary. Congratulations, you two. I was curious about what I see as the other side of this coin. What does he think about dating, humans, organic people? Unlike his 4 lasses, organic people can lie. They can change their minds. Organic people can manipulate you. They can gaslight you. They can really hurt you. You don't need me to tell you that. So does Dave Cat think dating organic women just isn't worth it?
I've actually been in affairs with organic women post Shidore's arrival. And as you mentioned, some of them have not worked out because of some of the aforementioned reasons that you mentioned. If you decide you get to a point where it's just like, I'm just tired of being jerked around by people, then if you say, well, I could get a doll and just not have to deal with that anymore, then that's perfect. If you can find yourself in that space to be comfortable with a doll and be creative enough in that space to make that doll a person, then that is an excellent solution to a myriad of problems. Not all problems, but most of them, let's just say. And I'm not saying that it's a case of people should shun organic partners. It's just that finding that special someone, maybe it's a case of because this has happened to other idolaters that we know, where it's they've had a relationship with a doll, or at least just had a doll, and then they have found their special someone after having the doll in their life.
The dolls have all the right anatomy for these relationships, especially sexual anatomy. And I saw an old interview with you that you'd said that your relationship with your wife was 70% for the sex and 30% for the companionship. And of course, as many relationships evolve, sometimes the sex gets less and less frequent. I wonder, have those percentages changed at all? 70% sex, 30% companionship over these 20 plus years?
It's now, I want to say, 60% companionship, 40% sex. When you wake up and you see Shidore or Elena, who's currently in our bed right now, and you're just like, she's there. This is wonderful. What a great thing. And then you get a moment in your day where it's like, wow, so what are you up to? What do you want to do for the next hour and a half or whatever? One thing leads to another, But the major thing about a relationship, I think, a genuine loving relationship. I mean, yeah, you could start out with sex. That's great. I mean, and if you've got that bedrock of sex, good sex, that's amazing. But there's got to be more than just sex. I mean, with Shidore especially, it's just the idea that she is always there and always willing to listen, and a shoulder to cry on, or a shoulder to sleep on, or, whatever. There is that. So at that stage, sex is just a really, really good moment. It's the dessert, the relationship is the meal.
Not the main course.
Thank you.
Why is it important to you to talk about this with people like me?
Well, for one, I mean, from what I've heard from the podcasts and whatnot that you've done, Kion, you're level-headed and inquisitive. So
those will be the blurbs that we put on the posters.
Level-headed, ellipse, inquisitive, ellipse.
Dave Cat.
Yeah, there you go. 4 stars. Yeah. But it's always good to speak to people who are more willing to disseminate information, such as what me and the missus keep going on about, rather than media tabloid circus frenzy. This is something that was a rarity, an extreme rarity in the late 90s, and a rarity in the mid 2000s. And now it's picking up steam. I mean, I'm trying to think, when did Lars and the Real Girl come out? I think that was 2007. But every other couple of years, there's something having to do with a person interacting with a doll, where the doll is more than just a joke or a thing. And it's I think always been an option that people haven't really considered because they thought it was jokey or just dumb or weird or creepy. But it's the whole thing of, if you have a good enough imagination, it can be a lot more rewarding than people think. And I honestly believe that, I want to say in this day and age, but this has been going on for several decades now, but people haven't really been encouraged to be creative. Creativity only seems to be like encouraged if it makes money. But if it's like a context of like, being creative for one's own sake, or being creative to work towards one's own happiness, then by all means that needs to be encouraged and fostered, especially if it can like take a person from abject loneliness and being bloody miserable and either harming someone else or harming themselves to a point where they're just like, yeah, it's great coming home because I've got synthetic partners waiting for me, and we're going to check out some stuff on the Criterion channel,
As opposed to sitting at home and being lonely and feeling like, because you don't have an organic human significant other and therefore you're worth less and miserable and depressed. That clearly, like when you look at it that way, well, obviously one option's better than the other.
Yeah. I mean, or even worse, I'd say, like having an organic partner, but they treat you like,
But at least you're not alone, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, oh, that makes me better than everyone else because I've got someone. Yeah, even though you're like having knockdown, drag out arguments like every other day,
And I love what you're saying about creativity. I'd never thought of it like that. But that's sort of like touching on what we were talking about before, where so much of your partners here are aspects of yourself, are aspects of the playful parts of yourself, the serious, the musical, the artistic. It's a beautiful act of creativity and improvisation, and it's constant. I just never thought of it that way.
Yeah, it is constant because there's stuff about Shichan that I still don't know.
There is a mystery, huh?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, technically speaking, Elena's the most mysterious because, her English is still a little shaky. And to be honest, I don't know much about Russia, and I have yet to do more research on Russia. So it's just like, it's a thing I'm working on. But, even like interacting with Shidore, like via Twitter, as you mentioned, we all have Twitter accounts. But something that has recently come up within the past year is just like, oh yeah, Shichan's got an uncle. His name is Hideo. He lives in Japan, and we think he used to be Yakuza, but I think it's actually a case of he just wants people to think he was in the Yakuza, but he's really just kind of a lazy bum, So, and just like even coming up with stuff like that, like the backstories and just, where she grew up, what like school she went to, what kind of bass did she play? It's a Thunderbird 4, incidentally.
I was going to ask. Thank you.
Yes. But yeah, it's just that aspect of creativity that just people just, even from something along the lines of like choosing your doll, because with 99% of the doll companies, it's just like, okay, I want that body with that face, with that eyeliner, that eye color, that eyeshadow, etc., etc. There's like the physical aspects you can be creative with, but if you're more creative with like all the backstory aspects, that fleshes out the doll to become a person in their right, and it's fun, it's great,
and to continue becoming themselves.
Yes, they become a better person. That is also true. It's absolutely true.
If you died tomorrow, what would you like to have happen with your lasses?
Wait, is that a sniper out there? Or I'm just making sure.
Yeah, public radio sniper. Yeah. We've been found out.
Yeah, it's a Nerf gun. It's fine.
No, it's got the logo on it, and it comes in a tote bag.
It's really overpriced.
Worth it, Dave Cat. So, if you died tomorrow, what would you like to have happen with your family?
Elena is going to my friend / collaborator, Amber Hawk Swanson, who's a fellow idolater and a performance artist. My friend, who literally lives about like a mile away, is getting Miss Winter because he thinks she's pretty cute and he loves her blue hair and her horns. Diane, we're not entirely sure where she's going. We'll find out when we get there. And the plan for Shidore is that I was going to be cremated. And like under normal circumstances, a real doll's head is hollow. And what was going to happen is that my ashes were going to go inside of her head. And the reason for that, as sappy as it is because she's always on my mind in life. So I'd always be on her mind in death. But she has a bunch of gears and servos inside her head now. So maybe I'll go for one of those like cremains where like you make a diamond out of and then she can just wear a giant like Liz Taylor sized ostentatious diamond. But basically she would have what's left of me around her neck or with her on some level. So
I can't help but think about, I'm a gay woman, and as much as it's good and right to celebrate, to acknowledge people who are LGBTQIA+, I've always wished that it was like, I wish my sexual orientation and the person whom I love, I just wish it was boring. You know, like I am so much more than this one aspect of my life. And for me, I feel like the ideal world is one in which people really don't care who holds my hand. Does that ring true for you and the ways that you find companionship and the ways the world reacts to you?
Getting people to be more tolerant and open-minded in general is an uphill struggle. Thankfully, within the past couple of years, it's been slightly less of an uphill struggle, even though it is still work needs to be done. But just hopefully within the next maybe 30, 40 years, it won't be so unusual to see people who say, yeah, oh yeah, my husband is a doll or my wife is a doll. Big deal. That would be the turning point for me personally. If we get to a point where if we have a doll or a gynoid or a synthetic with an organic, and someone says, oh yeah, I think that one person over there is a synthetic. Are they a couple? All right, cool. And they go back to what they're doing. When it's no longer a novelty, that's when it'll peak, I think. That's when we'll reach some plateau of acceptability and people understanding and getting it, just getting it. I mean, that's not going to happen for a while, but we have to do what we can to like just move forward towards that goal every day. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, Dave, Kat, Shidore, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you absolutely for inviting us on your show. It was fun, so thank you.
There is one more interview we want you to hear. The perspective of Courtney Webb, a woman who's just a few months into her new life with a female synthetic doll named Dahlia Muriel Hollifield.
I see it as a form of self-love. Like, people want to be loved so much, so they manifest all the love they need, and they just put in an object until the object can love them back. That's how I see it.
You can hear that conversation right now in your podcast feed. Just subscribe to the show, and while you're there, give it a review. That encourages the unfeeling podcast algorithm machine to favor our show and expose it to more brilliant people like you. And you'll feel like a really nice person who just said some nice things, and that's nice. Nice is good. We could use some more nice. And you can check out photos of Anthony and Dave Cat and his family and Courtney and Dahlia at our website, ctpublic.org/audacious. One other thing, we're producing a show which is entirely made up of people talking about what's gotten under their skin, what's been annoying them and frustrating them lately or in general. And so I'd love it if you called and left that message at 860-275-7312. The deadline is November 8th, and all I want is for you to just get it off your chest. Again, that number is 860-275-7312. Audacious is produced by me, Jessica Severin D. Martinez, and Katie Tolarski, with help from our interns, Abi Levine and Dylan Reyes at Connecticut Public Radio in Hartford. Send me your reactions and show ideas on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Kyone Wolf. And my email is cwolf@ctpublic.org. Thanks for listening.